Imagine a modern multinational corporation that possessed the legal right to mint its own currency, wage international war, and execute its rivals. This was the reality of the late 1500s. At the time, Asian spices like nutmeg and cloves were the most valuable commodities on Earth. The Spanish and Portuguese empires held a firm grip on these global supply chains, controlling the only known sea routes to the east. Independent Dutch merchants were desperate for a share of this wealth, but their internal competition was self-sabotaging. By bidding against each other for the same goods, they drove up purchase prices and decimated their own profits. In 1602, the Dutch government intervened, merging these competing merchants into a single entity, the VOC. They granted this new company a strict 21-year monopoly over all Dutch trade in Asia. To generate the capital required for such a massive operation, the VOC allowed the public to freely trade shares of the company, effectively inventing the world's first public stock market. The Dutch state paired this financial capital with extraordinary sovereign powers, granting the board of directors the legal right to build military forts, sign international treaties, and maintain private armies. The VOC functioned as a sovereign megacorp, engineered to conquer global trade by any means necessary. This massive influx of IPO capital allowed the VOC to build sprawling fleets and dominate the treacherous Cape route to Asia. In 1619, they secured a permanent foothold by capturing a Javanese port, renaming it Batavia, and building it into a fortified colonial capital. Within these territories, the VOC operated with total sovereign authority, completely independent of the Dutch government, even minting its own currency to fuel a private corporate economy. With Batavia as its headquarters, the VOC became an entrenched Asian empire, replacing the era of transient merchant fleets. The company's business strategy quickly shifted from outcompeting European rivals to violently eliminating them, such as the execution of English traders during the Amboina massacre. The darkest application of this corporate policy occurred in the Banda Islands in 1621. When the local population resisted the Dutch monopoly on nutmeg production, the VOC's private army slaughtered or enslaved thousands of islanders. These atrocities were not rogue military blunders. They were the cold, calculated enforcement of a corporate business model, backed by unchecked military might. By the mid-17th century, the VOC became the richest company in human history, monopolizing trade from spices and silk to porcelain and tea. They also held an exclusive and massively profitable status as the only Western traders permitted to operate in a closed-off Japan. Their search for new trade routes led to significant scientific contributions as Dutch explorers mapped unknown regions like Nova Hollandia and Nova Zealandia. This graph highlights their fatal structural flaw. The astronomical costs of maintaining private armies, the red line, eventually overtook the flattening blue line of spice profits. Changing global trade demands and relentless wars forced a debt spiral from which it couldn't recover. Ultimately, the military infrastructure that initially secured their monopoly was what bankrupted the corporation. The final collapse came in 1799, when the bankrupt megacorp was officially dissolved. Because the company had acted as a state, the Dutch government was forced to absorb its massive debts and directly take over its territories, creating the Dutch East Indies. The VOC proved the viability of the joint stock model and built the foundation of modern international finance. But that innovation is inseparable from a legacy of forced labor, massacres, and colonial exploitation. The global economy we rely on today was pioneered by an entity that weaponized capitalism, demonstrating that when corporate profit is backed by sovereign military power, the human cost is immeasurable.